Check.
Okay, I'd like to open the meeting for the month of March of the Metro North Committee. First thing on the agenda are public comments. Our first public speaker is Orrin Getz.
My name is Orrin Getz. Wow. I'll try to speak back a little lower. Okay. At the last Metro North Committee meeting, I spoke about railroad crossing safety and requested to speak to the new Metro North Safety Officer. After the meeting, I met President Giulietti as he was getting on the elevator. He promised me that the safety officer would contact me. Unfortunately, I was never contacted by the new Metro North Safety Officer. I have provided my business card and a little safety first pen that I hope she can remember to give me a call. Since then, the problem in Westchester has gotten worse. A car was stopped on the Roaring Road crossing, and this morning there was a front page article in the Journal News explaining that the town of Newcastle is not waiting for Metro North to improve safety at the railroad crossings. It's going ahead on its own. I strongly feel to be effective, the Metro North Safety Officer must be directly accessible to the public. And I was not contacted after I was even promised by the President. That's an important issue, and I would still like to follow up on that. Another very important thing is the West of Hudson study. There had been a West of Hudson study, and when Phase A was completed a few years ago, we were promised that the next phase would move ahead. Unfortunately, we've never heard about this project. I know this project is still very important to Orange County because I've spoken to Commissioner Metzger about it, and she has expressed her concerns about filling the gaps in the Port Jervis schedule and the need for a new midpoint yard. We really have to move ahead with that project as fast as possible. Also, Metro North needs to work very closely with New Jersey Transit to improve service not only on the Port Jervis line, but on the Pascack Valley line as well. There is a need to provide service on the Pascack Valley line that'll bring service into Rockland County for people to work. We don't have that now. Currently, the first Pascack Valley line weekday train into Rockland County arrives in Nanuet at 10:02. We have to come up with some solutions. I've been talking to New Jersey Transit people. There are some things that we can do, and we have to move ahead on that project also. Thank you.
Next, we have Murray Bowden.
Morning. I like that new screen up there. I can see myself and see all of you up there. Joe, I just want to remind you that you said you would meet with me when things got a little quieter. Have things got quieter? The new hearing devices that you have here, they work much better this week than last time. Thank you. I was at the Port Authority meeting last week, and they were discussing the bus terminal, replacing it. And what it turns out to be is exactly the wrong thing to do. You don't want to make a bigger bus terminal because you can't bring more buses into New York. There's no place to put them. You can't put your own buses there. Since they're going to build an Amtrak new tubes, then you might just as well put a third tube in there because the setup is all there, and bring the number 7 line right out to Secaucus. They said that 50% of the people get on the subway anyhow. So it would be good if there was better cooperation with Amtrak, New Jersey Transit. I can't talk while it's beeping. It would be better if you spent some time promoting the new tubes and realizing that a bigger bus terminal does nobody any good. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I need a motion to approve the minutes of our last meeting, please.
So moved.
Second. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. There are no changes to our work plan. Joe.
First report I have to give on is on the CSX freight derailment. Just after 2 a.m. on Saturday morning, March 14th, two cars of an 86-car northbound CSX freight train derailed on Track 1 just south of Beacon Station on the Hudson Line. This was an equipment wheel climb derailment, and the cause is under investigation by the Federal Railroad Administration. With only one track available for train service through the affected area, Upper Hudson customers experienced delays up to 30 minutes during the weekend. CSX and Metro North worked quickly to safely remove the unaffected cars and then re-railed the two CSX cars by 3:30 p.m. on Saturday afternoon. This allowed for Metro North forces to begin repairs on Track 1, which were completed early Monday morning in time for normal AM peak service for March 16th. The derailment significantly damaged Track 3, which is a controlled sidings. The repairs to Track 3 began on Monday, and after two mainline tracks were available for service. I have to thank everyone who responded to the derailment. Their efforts were outstanding, from the quick response in the early hours to working together to remove CSX freight train from the scene, re-railing the two cars, and making repairs to the damaged tracks. Our forces achieved this in less than 48 hours while continuing to operate train service safely and with the least disruption possible given the circumstances. I truly appreciate the continued commitment by our employees to the railroad. As stated in last month's meeting in regards to the status of the derailment in Grand Central Terminal, all right, I just wanted everyone to know that though there was a broken rail at the site of the derailment, we are continuing to again work with the FRA on this issue and getting it resolved. From the service to the soccer games, this year a new Major League Soccer team is playing at Yankee Stadium, the New York City Football Club. The club will play 17 home games at Yankee Stadium. Their home opener was Sunday, March 15th. Metro North provided special game day service to our Yankees E 153rd Street station for the home opener and will provide game day service for all NYCFC home games in the future. Our service plan for the NYCFC home games is as follows. Direct service from the Hudson Line stations to Yankees East 153rd Street Station. Special game day train service between GCT Harlem 125th Street Station and Yankees 153rd Street Station. This consists of a mix of regular Hudson Line trains making extra stops at the 153rd station, and a special shuttle train between the three stations. The train service operates 3 to 4 times per hour before and after the game. Harlem and New Haven Line customers make the connections to the special game day trains at 125th Street. The service plan was predicated on our forecasted average of game day ridership between 1,700 and 2,200. In general, we schedule a full baseball-type service plan with direct service from all lines when we predict ridership may approach or exceed 3,000. In past years, game day ridership to the Premier League soccer games at the stadium has consistently fallen below the 3,000 riders, and the Metro North share of ticket sales to these soccer games has averaged about 5%. Based on this information, we decided to operate the service as described above and not a full baseball-type schedule, which costs in excess of $20,000 to operate for each game. Actual ridership to the March 15th home opener game was 2,100. We will continue to monitor the ridership and will adjust our service plan as necessary. On St. Patrick's Day, based on our counts performed at Grand Central Terminal, the St. Patrick's Day parade ridership was 4% higher than in 2014. However, ridership was well below the 2011 and 2012 levels when the weather was warmer. In addition to our regular weekday schedule, the service plan included an extra Hudson Line train, and tickets were collected prior to boarding at Poughkeepsie, New Hamburg, and Beacon stations due to high parade ridership. An alcohol ban was in effect all day on trains, platforms, and at stations to maintain orderly travel for customers. We thank the MTA Police for their support and coordination with us on this effort. Overall, the service plan worked smoothly. The fare changes. New fares for travel between New York stations went into effect yesterday, March 22nd. The vast majority of fares increased by 4.25% or less. The fare increase does not affect ticket prices for travel between stations in Connecticut and New York or between stations within Connecticut. Retirement of Tim McCarthy. Tim McCarthy, Metro-North's Vice President of Capital Programs, will be leaving the railroad this month. His expertise will be greatly missed. Tim has devoted more than 3 decades to the railroad industry and Metro-North. After receiving his Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering, Tim was hired by General Electric to work on railroad projects, first in their factory and then in the field. In 1979, he joined Conrail's Metropolitan Region, Metro-North's immediate predecessor railroad, as supervisor of electrical equipment in the Maintenance of Equipment Department and steadily rose through the ranks. He was selected Senior Electrical Engineer and began this position the same day Metro-North was born, January 1st, 1983. His career with the Capital Programs Division began in 1984 as the Assistant Director of Car Rehabilitation, overseeing the direct service from all Hudson lines, overseeing the program management and technical development of every major car overhaul that has been performed. He'd like to do the service as well. From the 244 M2 cars on the New Haven line to the 104 coaches in the east and west of Hudson service. In 1996, Tim was again promoted, overseeing the technical development and project management of new car purchases, including our M7 and M8 fleets, and in 2010 was appointed Senior Director of Capital Programs. During his tenure at Metro-North, Tim fostered the important interrelationship between the work of the Capital Program Division and the success of the Operations Division. This was crucial to enable the railroad to provide excellent service to our customers as critical work on our infrastructure progressed. Throughout his career, Tim has demonstrated his commitment to managing well and spending every dollar wisely to ensure a high return on MTA's investments. His legacy can be seen in the countless successful capital projects he helped make a reality. Please join me in congratulating Tim and in offering him your full support. And Tim, if you'll come up for a minute, there's a plaque we'd like to give you. Tim is not known for being shy, so I just... Why don't you get between us?
Joe, just slide over.
There we go.
Even a little more surface.
Okay.
I'm going to slide this out of the way for a minute. Just hold it. I told him I didn't want it.
Good luck. I should have asked if there's any questions before I began on Tim, because, though he protests too much. He actually does enjoy all the notoriety. No questions? Yep.
Any questions for Joe? Okay. Ann?
Good morning. Our safety statistics through January are in your materials beginning on page 17. It's worth noting that although our employee injuries were up for the month of January, we believe that's mostly due to the weather that we saw in January, and the same you'll probably see in February as well. We're still calculating those numbers, but we think those will be up a little bit as well because of the weather. Our customer injuries, however, are down 60% compared to the same period last year, which obviously is very significant. And there were no contractor injuries at all in the month of January. Again, another significant note. Our enhanced safety actions are in your materials directly following the statistics. We held our first quarter stand down last week, and our focus was job safety briefings. Our top 3 injuries for January and February, which were slip, trips, and falls, overexertion, and human impacts. We also discussed the safety relationship with daylight savings time and measures that you can take around your house as well as at work to be safer, as well as motor vehicle safety was also discussed during the stand down. Our C3RS program is progressing. We do have training sessions planned for the first week in April for all of our supervision so that we can proceed with that program. So we're very excited about that. Obstructive sleep apnea pilot is also proceeding, and we have, as of Friday, screened 73 employees so far out of the pilot program. So we're very excited about that, and that's progressing as well. And I'll be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you. Chief?
Good morning. For the month of February, we continue to go down in crime. We were at 8 incidents compared to 10, 20% reduction. Year-to-date, we're down 28% in the Metro North region. We had 2 assaults and 5 larcenies. There was arrest on both of those assaults. One was on a conductor, one was on a police officer. The 5 larcenies, 3 of those were credit card related. One was a bag and one was a phone that was taken from a store out of Grand Central. As stated, St. Patrick's Day was relatively successful. We had 3 minor incidents, which were, and a handful of summonses that were written out, that were wrote, and we had less aided cases, which, less intox individuals. So I would say it was successful. We're continuing our grade crossing enforcement. We've had 190 details and issued about 80 summonses year to date. If there's any, and also before I end, I just want to thank Tim for his hard work, particularly on the Stormville facility, the K-9 facility. So we appreciate your efforts and congratulations on your retirement. If there's any questions?
Neil?
Chief, I'm not sure I understand the phrase detail. You just, what's a detail mean?
Well, specifically assign police officers to a grade crossing. In between assignments, or when they're not on a radio run, they'll do it, or we'll take them specifically off patrol and put them on a specific location.
Just to add some color to that, does that mean they were there for a minute? That mean they're there for a couple hours? Like, what's that mean?
Some of them could be there for 45 minutes to an hour. Sometimes it's less. If they get a job, they'll leave. But normally it's beyond 30 minutes to 45 minutes.
Any other questions? Okay, information items. Joe, you're back on.
The annual Strategic Investment and Planning Studies report, the information is in the book, and we're available to answer any questions. The annual, go ahead. I'm sorry.
About that, to reflect the question raised by Mr. Getz. Isn't it on?
Can't talk into it.
It's very directional.
Okay. We have been talking about the West of Hudson study for some 3 to 5 years now. The last information I had at my last briefing indicated that we would have our results in January, but it's March. When will we get those results, and what are you doing to move it forward?
First off, we have reached out to New Jersey Transit, and we continue that reach out. John has been meeting with them, talking to them. They do have issues regarding the number of personnel that they have available for trains to be able to go in and increase the service over there. So we have what I'll call a more firm date on when they feel they can do it, but they're also doing everything they can to try and advance that. If I find that we can announce an advanced date, then I'll come forward with it, but right now I'm even reluctant to go and give the date that's there because it, again, goes beyond where we first felt we were going to be on it. But the problem appears to be an internal problem that they're having with having enough crews even for their own trains, let alone doing an increase. So it's not that we're not trying to reach out and do it.
I appreciate the effort that you've been making on that front because we had been promised a mid-afternoon train supposedly this year, and I'd like to see it this year. But I was specifically making reference to what your staff calls the WORDIS study, which includes double track, bypasses, midpoint yard, and should be in your capital plan.
And you are correct, that is in the capital plan, and we are working to see what's going to happen with the capital plan. As you know, there's been a lot of discussion going on with Albany over the capital plan, but it is still in the capital plan, particularly in terms of the options for the midpoint yard.
I appreciate that you included it. It was not included in the first capital plan that I saw, and I was not very happy about that. I'm hopeful that it will be maintained. Thank you.
It is our intentions to maintain it, and yes, and that the one that made the most sense was going after the midpoint yard. There's still a discussion on which of the locations, but yes, that is in the capital plan. Okay. On the annual elevator and escalator report, the annual report reflects the availability of elevators and escalators during last year, and again, we're available to answer any questions.
Any questions regarding the track and elevator?
On the track program quarterly update, as noted in last month's meeting, Metro North's work plan was revised to reflect a quarterly update on Metro North's track program to be given in March, June, September, and December. The first quarter report highlights the progress made on Metro North's ongoing maintenance work and to bring the infrastructure to a state of good repair. Glenn will now provide a brief update on this program and what we've got accomplished through the winter months.
Excuse me, in the first quarter, we traditionally bring our forces into Grand Central Terminal to stay out of the weather. You'll notice that we installed 5 switches. Those are switches and single slips on Ladder K in Grand Central. We were also fortunate enough between snowstorms to be able to install about 9,000 feet of new welded rail. We surfaced about 5 miles of track. We continue our pot welding activities, again, when we're not facing the snow. And a very significant milestone is we completed the redecking of Walk Track 4, which means that all 4 tracks now on Walk Drawbridge have brand new ties, brand new rail, brand new miter rails, brand new proximity detectors. So that bridge is on top side in pretty good shape, and we're looking forward to state of Connecticut's replacement in the next 3 to 5 years. And significantly, we got a jump start on our Sandy remediation. We unloaded about 11,000 tons of riprap and placed that along the shoreline to armor the shoreline and protect against future storm surges. Finally, one of the other things we do in the winter is we take one of our rail vacs, which we normally go out during the good weather and remove fouled ballast. We modify that so that it fits within the station platforms in Grand Central Terminal. It says in here that we've done 14 platforms. That's about 2 weeks old. We're up about 20 now. We go through and the accumulated debris, dirt, stuff that is brought in by trains or thrown on the tracks by passengers, we clean them up during the winter so that we have we reduce that, make a nice environment for our passengers. And the last thing on the bottom is we keep track of the slow orders that we add and take off. There's a lot of work that we can't do when the ground is frozen, significant surfacing. So you'll notice that during this period of time, we had a net add of slow orders, but now that the weather has broken a little bit, not entirely, we'll start to work those off. Thank you. If there's any questions.
Any questions? Neil?
Thank you. Joe, I'm actually going to go back to the strategic initiatives piece because you triggered a question, Glenn. On the automated track inspection, we talk about that we have now a comprehensive plan. What percentage of the physical plant do we automatically inspect over the course of a year? Is it 100% of the plant? Is it 300%? Do we what's the periodicity we see the whole plant, the whole physical infrastructure once?
When you're asking whether or not all of the infrastructure is inspected, it's done several times a year, and all of it is done. Glenn, you want to give him the...
Last year, we did it 5 times.
Got it.
We're also in the midst of procuring autonomous equipment, which will go on our revenue fleet. And that stuff will give us continuous inspection throughout the year. We anticipate that those units will be delivered and installed later on this year.
Any other questions?
Okay, the East of Hudson schedule change. The schedule change is a handout and provided as information, and Mike Schiffer will now give you a brief update on these changes.
On all lines east of Hudson, effectively starting on April 26, 2015, we're going to see some minor schedule changes. Is this on? Yeah. Minor adjustments will be made for reliability and performance improvements, as well as to accommodate construction projects. In addition, all of these construction projects will require continuous weekend track outages. To compensate, 5 minutes of travel time is added to all weekend trains on all 3 lines. Specifically by line, on the Hudson line, in response to customer requests, we're restoring the Greystone stop on the 7:39 a.m. train from Irvington, which was eliminated in 2014. The 10:55 p.m. semi-express from Croton-Harmon will be combined with the 11 p.m. local from Croton-Harmon in an effort to better align service with evolving ridership trends. The 8:59 a.m. weekday train from Poughkeepsie will now depart Poughkeepsie at 9:15 a.m. to resolve a conflict with an Amtrak train that was adjusted to accommodate a weekend construction project. On the Harlem line, to relieve overcrowding on the 6:51 a.m. from Southeast, we are adjusting the stopping pattern of that train and the 7:01 from Southeast to balance ridership between the 2 trains. To make room for the adjusted schedules of these 2 trains, the 6 a.m. from Wassaic will be adjusted to depart 11 minutes earlier. On weekends on the Harlem line, 5 weekend trains that start or end at Mount Kisco will now be extended to Southeast. In addition, 1 deadhead train that runs empty on weekends will be turned into a revenue train to Southeast, which departs from Grand Central at 1:22 p.m. This is a no-cost initiative. Finally, on the New Haven line, there will be a new through train to Danbury, departing Grand Central at 8:01 p.m. that will make stops at Greenwich, Stamford, Noroton, Darien, Rowayton, South Norwalk, and then up the branch to Danbury. This is targeted to benefit customers who work late in New York City and travel to the Danbury branch. To provide for this new through train, the current 4:29 p.m. through train to Danbury will again originate in Stamford. We found that most customers out of Grand Central actually get off of that 4:29 train at Stamford, and they'll have an alternative, the 4:33 train, to provide that. The customers who ride through to Danbury at that early hour from Grand Central will also have an alternative. As part of that package, the current 8:03 New Haven train, 8:03 p.m. New Haven train is combined with the current 8:06 New Haven train, and that combined train will leave Grand Central at 8:07 and make stops at Stamford, East Norwalk, and then all stops to New Haven. This initiative will put service where it's most effective for our customers to better match demand, as well as better utilize our equipment and improve overall reliability. Finally, on the Waterbury branch, there are 2 major construction projects. There's track work between April 25th and May 3rd that will result in substitute bus service for 9 days, day and night. And steel repairs to the Devon Bridge will result in no Waterbury branch trains traveling west of the connection to the main line. To compensate, a new temporary station is being built at the junction location, which will be called Devon Transfer. Waterbury branch customers should see no change in travel times, although the 1 a.m. peak train that currently operates from Waterbury to Stamford will now terminate at Devon Transfer. Customers will change trains for onward travel to Stamford. That summarizes the schedule changes for April 26th.
Any questions regarding the schedule changes? Okay. Joe, you're into procurements.
Under procurements, there are 6 procurement actions in the total amount of $23.4 million. There is 1 non-competitive procurement in the total amount of $80,000. There are 3 competitive procurements totaling $22.5 million, and there are 2 ratifications totaling $827,000.
Okay, I make a motion to recommend these procurements. I I need a second by the committee, and we will have discussion. Okay. Discussion. Any questions regarding the procurements as presented? Having none? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Carried. Monthly reports.
The monthly reports on Metro North's operations, financial, ridership, and capital programs are included in the committee agenda book, and we're available to answer any questions you may have on these reports.
John?
Thank you. Good morning. Joe, are you going to go over it at all, or should I just ask my question? I understand and support the notion that safety has to come first, but it's hard to not notice some of the numbers that jump off the page, particularly with respect to February for both Metro North and Long Island Railroad for on-time performance. And I was wondering if maybe you could take a couple moments to comment on them. I mean, the numbers are startlingly low, and the reasons are different for Metro North and for Long Island Railroad, because with February, the first thing that jumps out to me is, all right, well, you know, I know we had a bad winter. I can't remember what was December, January, February, March, but it doesn't seem to be, you know, weather-related as much as I would have guessed. So perhaps you can comment on that.
Well, first I would say that where we went from one of the warmest Januaries, we went into the coldest February since the 1930s. It did have a tremendous impact on the service, including a lot of the diesel service, and we also had a number of incidents where the cold weather caused snaps in the rail, where we had to go in there and repair the running rail. So to equate it, I would say that one happened to both us and the Long Island. And some mornings the Long Island started with them, and then we found out later in the morning we had the same issues. Beyond that, John, is there? Go ahead.
I just want to confirm that the majority of OTP hits we did have in the month of February was directly due to the weather extremes we experienced. For the month of February, the average daily temperature was only 20 degrees, and we did have 2.5 times the normal amount of snowfall. As Joe had stated, if you look at the train categories of delay, it shows about 52% of the delays are attributable to the infrastructure. The majority of those delay minutes are due to broken rails that contract during the cold. We also had a high number of switch failures that Glenn's forces are addressing. On the fleet side, our older fleets, basically the diesels and the old New Haven M2, 4, and 6 cars, did have double the amount of MDBF failures during the month of February. That's related to the older design of the brake systems and door systems on those two particular fleets.
John, I guess the thing that my colleague John Bowen is raising is that page 71 says that 2,400 some odd out of 4,600 were maintenance of way, not weather and environmental. So maybe there's a categorization issue.
Yes.
Because when I read weather and environmental, I think that's due to the weather. And when I read maintenance of way, I read it's tied to something's in the way. So if they're both all related to weather, then we need to figure out how to clarify that in terms of our classification, because then Mr. Bowen's comment then is the same one I wrote down when I read the notes, which was, it doesn't seem like it's a lot of weather stuff.
And Glenn, before you respond, these are very directional, so you have to talk directly into the mic. That's why it picks up and fades on and off, so you got to go right into the mic.
Included in maintenance of way is switch failures due to snow and ice obstructing the movement of the point, which in the heavy snow we tend to get because accumulated snow on equipment as you go through the switch will fall off. We had a lot of those this year because of the heavy snow, and as was stated before, when the temperature drops significantly, we will get pull-aparts and broken rails. We were facing that daily, so even though you see it under maintenance of way, it's a direct result of the weather.
Same thing with maintenance of equipment.
It's Mr. Ballin. Same with maintenance of equipment. Primarily the two fleets that were most significantly impacted were the diesel fleet, our locomotives and coaches, along with the older M2s, 4s, and 6s. If you look at the quantities of delay incidences, We did double the amount of MDBF failures, and not to justify it, but the number is relatively low for the month. Our failure goal for a month is 35 total train delays directly related to equipment failures. That number was 56 during the month of February. We did see a slight decline across all fleets, but again, the primary fleets that were affected were the coaches and locomotives, along with the 2s, 4s, and 6s. The M7s and the M8s that have newer technology, brake systems and door systems performed very well. The M3s as well that we put through the M3 PIP about 5 or 6 years ago also continued to perform very consistently throughout the year.
John, what is congestion resulting from, excuse me, infrastructure failure?
Congestion.
There are a number of those. What does that mean?
Congestion resulting from infrastructure failure would be, for example, if we had a switch failure at CP5, for example, at Mott Haven, we might have 3 or 4 trains delayed for the first 40 minutes of that period until the switch actually was repaired by our maintainers on site. Unfortunately, we then have residual delays for the next 2.5 hours. So those residual delays due to the switch failure are delays due to congestion.
In other words,
Okay.
like sometimes when we lose a train and it dies and it's on one of the platform tracks, you'll have to back the train that's behind it, go around that train, pull down, okay, and then try to get back in further down the line where you have a switch that'll allow you to go back in. But in the meantime, once you've done that, you're affecting every other train that's coming in the rush hour. So and we truly are, I won't say we're at capacity, we're close to capacity. So once you lose one train, you're going to immediately affect a number of others. So what we do is we've put the cascading delays on due to the impacts from the infrastructure, the first main cause on the delay.
Do we do seasonal analyses of what we could do better to avoid these types of delays? Both, we discuss this, you probably get annoyed at me, every fall with the leaves. But similarly, if you have a colder or worse than anticipated winter, how do we improve? What's the process for that?
Well, first, before John jumps in and Glenn jumps in, because both of them want to jump in and tell you what we've been planning for, and it's everything to do with, if you watch what we do to plan for the leaves coming down and even going into the cold weather, when you get a particularly cold weather like this, one of the issues, and you've heard part of the answer when John tells you the newer equipment has been designed to go and handle that. When you're still dealing with diesels that have to run compressors, those compressors have a hard time compressing the air up to where it needs to be. You get more leakage in the valves and everything else because of the cold weather. So part of the answer is as the newer equipment comes in, we've been very, very successful in getting better returns and better mean distance between failures. So you're going to see as we get more and more of the equipment, some of this will go away, but both John and Glenn would like to give you a little bit of what they've done to go and deal with this.
What we do every year post any seasonal event is we do a review of the types of failures we actually experience both on rolling stock as well as on the infrastructure. We then try to determine the root cause of those failures to see what corrective actions we can make, either through design changes or through maintenance adjustments in how we actually perform maintenance on both the rolling stock and the right-of-way. An example of that would be an initiative that I think MW is going to be taking on the track side with regards to neutral rail temperature. What we do on the rolling stock side is we identify if we did have an abnormally high number of failures on one particular type of brake valve. We do tear-down analyses of that particular valve. We call in the manufacturer. Sometimes we identify we might have had a material change over the years. One of the commodities that we purchase that has had some variable quality are rubber components within the brake system. As our suppliers change, sub-suppliers of rubber, different people make different formulations of that. So we work with those suppliers to improve the quality of their product they deliver to us. We also have feedback into our maintenance and repair process. We review the procedures to rebuild the valves, and we ensure that the quality is both in the material and the workmanship that we provide. So Glenn?
One of the things that we learned in past years is that we get an awful lot of third rail burners where you get water that has its assault from either station platforms or roadways that come down on our infrastructure and completes a circuit from the third rail to the running rail. So what we did, we ordered and installed 1,000 fiberglass channels to replace the steel channel which holds up the third rail. We installed them on all 4 tracks in the tunnel from 72nd to like 78th Street. We didn't have a single burner this winter in that stretch. Our burners now are concentrated, for example, underneath the Tappan Zee Bridge approach on 287 at station platforms. So that's our the next set of bracket channels that come in. We're going there. So we are, you know, learning from what happens and addressing them.
Thank you for the explanation. My last comment on this would be with respect to the communication to the customer. I think that maybe that also needs to be, I'm sure you do, but I think that that needs to be analyzed and improved a bit. During the delays, people need to be informed, particularly with the new advanced system that we have going up the lines. The people need to be informed what's going on just so they can plan accordingly. And I just want to point that out. That probably could have used some improvement. I give you details, you know, away offline.
And I will say to you that obviously we're always looking to improve. Sue, do you want to talk about some of the social media we use to go and put out information when we're having this happen?
We send immediate messages with delays. In real time, we do go out with different communications, email alerts go out to those that have subscribed to that. We do post on Twitter as well. That gives a lot of delay information. Facebook, when necessary, we do that in addition to our PA announcements and things like that. We will support that with information on our web when the delay information becomes more significant, affects several trains or a portion of a line, and we will do that in the web. But we can certainly review that again and see what other improvements we can make.
Particularly at the station, if you're waiting and don't know what's going on. I mean, and up in Westchester, for example, where you can't get internet at a number of the stations, which is a different subject. But
well, actually, our cellular LCD project is going to support that. We will have the media out there in the stations as we continue to expand that through 2019. And we can send free-form messaging as well as the delay information that's up with the train information, the train status.
thank you.
Then in order to clarify this response, since I have experienced, as any rider has, the same thing that Mr. Ballin has, at a station or on a train, and you don't get the social media, you don't get the ability to, assuming you cared to, tap into Facebook. What is the exact plan for getting that information, one, to the station, and two, to the train itself so it can be announced, assuming that they will announce it?
The information to the trains is routed through the rail control center, the operations control center, and they communicate directly with the train crews so that the train crews can provide the information to the customers. In terms of getting the information out to the station, you're right, a lot of our methods at this point, customers have to reach out for the information and collect it themselves. In terms of pushing the information out into the stations, like I said, the cellular project will address a good portion of that. But we will be looking to see, utilizing focus groups, what other methods our customers prefer to get. How do they want to get it? Pushing out information, some people don't want that, which is why some people don't sign up for email alerts, let's say, because they don't want to get repeated information pushed out and they like to solicit it. So we are going to be evaluating that again this year and see how customers' preferences are changing.
I appreciate that. Basic communication on the train itself would be nice as a starter. And if that, that's sort of hit and miss in my own personal experience. So
Yes.
if that can be regularized, that would be a nice thing.
Obviously, your comments are valid. There is some level of inconsistency on onboard train communications. The process that Sue alluded to, which is the Operations Control Center providing information to train crews, I think we do reasonably well when we have specific trains that are involved in an incident where the customers are delayed for longer periods of time. The challenge we face is what I'll call a broadcast message. For example, if we're running a poor AM peak for some reason and we have a large quantity of trains running 10 minutes late, we have a challenge there to have the OCC or the control center notify each crew individually. We do have part of our onboard ticketing, our new TIMS application, which uses an iPhone 5, where our train crews will be getting information similar to what customer service puts out to our customers. We're going to go through a process this summer to basically do a better job next year when the crews will actually have this electronic messaging capability on board their trains. We'll finish the rollout sometime in June, I believe. But by the time we get the crews up and running with the procedures and we get the process down, we should be better for next winter when we have the more significant disruptions.
Yeah.
At the risk of being redundant, I just want to amplify our Vice Chair's point. I've mentioned several times before at these meetings about how the worst thing about air travel, the absolute worst, is when you sit there circling over an airport and the pilot, who I'm sure is busy doing calls down and figuring out patterns and what altitude, does not communicate. They could talk all they want about safety, but the pilot doesn't talk. And I'd like to find a way not only to do that more, what our Vice Chair is describing, but more importantly, frankly, be more formulaic about it. Like if a delay is over a certain number of minutes, knowing, of course, the number one thing is operating the train safely and figuring out how to operate it and where to go next, but getting some rigor around a standard operating procedure around when you communicate, because I know their fear is you're going to bother, I don't want to have too many messages, too many announcements, but right now we have virtually none on board. Now, for those of you who fly a lot, you probably can't stand the number of announcements you hear when you're sitting there waiting to put your seatbelt on. I can't believe how many times I'm told how to put a seatbelt on. I feel like at 44 years old I can pretty much master the seatbelt, but we're the opposite. We don't say anything generally. On occasion, a conductor will say something. So I think you guys it'd be wonderful to find a way to more rigorously and standardize that approach. And frankly, the best thing about it would be it's part of that perception topic I talk about all the time. The more we talk to our consumer about what we're doing, the more they believe it's happening. Even though we know it's happening, they just don't hear about it.
Any other questions on our operations? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Thank you.